All right, I think we're all set here. All right. Welcome everybody to the first Analytics Translator Meetup of Xomnia. So we have a series of data and drinks in which we focus on AI topics. And this is actually the first one in which we'll be focusing on the business side of AI. So good to see everybody's joining in this room. Hope you all had a nice meal. I hope you all have a drink, ready for the next hour. My name is Jasper Kuhler. I'm a lead analytics translator at Xomnia. I've been so since last year, so 1.5 years. And it's my honor to introduce today's event. But I'm not the only speaker. We also have Teun van Vliet, who's going to be, well, sharing some pretty interesting stuff about proving AI's value. Teun, perhaps you can come up and introduce yourself.
Hi guys, so my name is Teun van Vliet. I am, as you can see on the screen, a data scientist and consultant. I've been doing that for the past 8 years and mostly working at telcos, which you'll see in a bit, though I have some use cases on, and well, building models on customer analytics, but also working on the consultant side of things. I really like the translation to the business side. For the rest, actually, I just quit my consultancy job and I'm actually a freelancer. So I'm also just saying here, if you're looking for a role, if you're looking for a nice, good data scientist, then I'm your man.
Cool. Yeah, and what Teun didn't mention is that we actually know each other from our previous job. So it's a small world, this data science thing. And we've been working together at several projects, actually. So we were just chatting right now and going over the materials, and we instantly clicked together in this project vibe that we already had. So yeah, let's see where it brings us. Yes. So for those of you that don't know, this is Xomnia, the building you're in, and we're an AI consultancy, which means we advise our clients about AI solutions, and yeah, we then help building these. We've been doing so since 2013. I'm not sure if that's still on there. So we've been in the game for quite some time. And besides the commercial work that we do, we also have a couple of corporate responsibility initiatives, social responsibility initiative, like initiative for Ukraine, but also working with the ocean cleanup, etc., etc. As core team within Xomnia, we actually have 4 roles. So today we're going to be focusing on the Analytics Translator. I'm not sure how many Analytics Translators are currently in the room. You have some people with the AT title in their LinkedIn. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'd say that's about 10%. So that's perhaps a little more, 15%, 20%. So that's not a whole lot. So which is a sort of a relief because I'm going to be diving into the role of an AT. But besides that, we also have a bunch of other roles. So we have the data scientist and then the machine learning engineer, who both build AI solutions and also deploy them to production. And as a 4th role, we have data engineers who focus on the data platform side of things, the infrastructure. As I just mentioned, Analytics Translator. It's a term that's been coined by McKinsey quite some years ago already, actually. And it was once promised as the next step in the data domain. But we, Xomnia, actually borrowed a couple elements from this definition. So it's always good to start with a nice Venn diagram. But we feel an analytics translator should actually be able to translate between a couple of fields that most organizations deal with. So of course you have your business side of things, you have your data side of things, and you have your tech. So in a nutshell, we feel that it's the AT's role to address the so what question of AI or of data and analytics. And in order to do so, this person speaks these languages. To interpret between these fields is actually necessary. First of all, for analytics teams to understand, what are the business goals? So to prevent hobby projects. I'm not sure if any of you guys have heard of this, but have clear goals is quite a good thing to prevent wasting money. And on the other side of things, to make sure that business stakeholders know the possibilities and limitations of AI. This sounds pretty straightforward, but I can tell you that is really not. One of the things we then did is to divide this analytics translator role in different sub-roles. So for example, we act as product owner, but also as data analyst, or we have a bunch of other things that I won't go into right now. And besides that, we have a bunch of skills that we look for in this person. Just a primer on what we see as the profile of an analytics translator. And if you guys think otherwise, we'd be happy to discuss it. So that's a what. And then we get to the why. So why would you need an analytics translator? So to address this question, we came up with something we call a playbook. And a playbook is something that's, it originates from American football. So this coach would have this big booklet in his pocket, and he would whip it out when a certain play was being done, so that he would always have a reply to this play. So in our situation, this purpose is to, first of all, define the team. So which kind of profile do we need? And how this team solves certain problems, which we call plays. And we then use this as a sort of a guideline to structure client conversations that we have. So of course, Xomnia's mission, as you may know, is to make impact with AI. And in order to translate what we mean by impact, we come up with these 7 data-related questions, or things that most of our clients actually deal with. These challenges are actually pretty common, and to solve them, you basically you can figure out what you can do with all the data. You need to know how you can keep your customer satisfied. You need to find new sources of income. It's basically answering these questions keeps you relevant in a digital world. The first 3 of these questions are really strategic and tactical. So it's about defining your data strategy, thinking about what kind of use cases you need to pick up in order to act upon some strategic themes within your company. And then from 4 onward, it's more execution. So operations, actually building stuff together with a team, and then deploying or productionizing a solution that you've built. The question that we're going to be homing into today is the 5th one. And we see that as a sort of a pivot point, a really critical point in any life cycle of a data product. Because, as you can see, the question is, does my data product actually live up to its promise? As you start building things, most of the time you should have a business case somewhere in the history of a project that calculated a data product's theoretical value. Today we're going to be talking about how you can actually prove this value. So does a data product indeed live up to its promise? Which is quite necessary to prove your raison d'être, like a reason for existence for any data team. If there are no questions so far, I'll continue with the last slide for me. Oftentimes, asking yourself the question, does this data product actually live up to its promise, comes with some consequences. What do you mean live up to its promise? You mean it can fail, right? So to a certain degree, building data products and do predictive modeling is sort of high-end guessing, right? It's a guessing game to a point, which is something not every stakeholder out there knows, right? So stuff can fail. but we do have a business case, right? Well, a business case is just a business case. To actually release a product, a data product into the wild can come with some risks, and you don't really know if actually a data or a business case will be valid X months after some development. In order to do this, we within the team came up with a sort of approach to prove a data product's value. And for those of you who have statistical background or who are familiar with setting up experience, this might come quite, this might be quite familiar. We have 3 stages. It's also sometimes referred to as DOAE, design of experiment. The first one is the design part. So you're going to be defining several parameters like success measures. So which variable do you actually want to control when you're going to be testing something? You need to create some hypotheses, including your 0 hypotheses and several others. If you're going to be testing something, of course, you have your control groups and your test groups, which includes stuff like randomization, sampling, calculating statistical power that you need in order to actually say something, as we say in Dutch, with dry eyes, and then subsequently planning your experiment. Conducting an experiment is also a separate stage. It's a finite amount of time in which you monitor if everything's going according to plan. This includes end user involvement. You're going to be looking at your measures. And of course, you need to check if the outcomes are coming through. The outcomes is what the final stage is all about. If you have those, you can analyze them. So analyzing these, first of all, is to evaluate if you actually succeed. So did we verify the hypothesis that we have? Can we say something about significance? If you've documented your results, you can then translate these outcomes into real-life business impact. So it's quite an important step that's sometimes forgotten. This is the actual so what question of AI. So if we're going to be releasing this product into the wild, what happens? Will we make more money? Will we save some costs? Will we increase customer satisfaction because of X, Y, Z? So far, my introduction. I think I've talked enough about this topic at this point. What do you say we look at some actual real-life examples? Yeah, cool. So,
thanks, Jasper. All right, so I will be showcasing 2 use cases where I have conducted experiments. Actually, one of them where Jasper is also what we did together. So 2 use cases, and the first one is actually looking at a machine learning model, actual AI model, where it was for a business-to-business department, telco, where they're selling internet subscriptions. And I'll go into that in a bit. And then number 2 is actually testing the effect of door-to-door action. So this is more of looking at the causal effect. So it's not really related to a model that you have, or an AI model that you have that you've productionized or you're trying to productionize and build, but it's more about finding the causal effects, which is also very valuable to look at, obviously. So the first use case is the context is like this, right? So there's a telco, and what they have B2B, they're selling internet subscriptions to small businesses mostly, right? So you have the SMEs, small medium enterprises. Most of them are around less than 5 employees, and they have a couple of channels where they sell these subscriptions. One of them actually is also door-to-door, but this one actually we're looking at is telesales. So basically just cold calling. They have a list of leads that they get from the Chamber of Commerce. They have some extra things that they do there to send this to the call center, and the call center just calls them one after the other and trying to get a sale out of it. So what they want to do is to increase their sales conversion in this channel. So what they did is, actually what we did, but what they did is they built a machine learning model that predicts which leads have the highest chance of buying the product. So basically what you get is a list, and you have probabilities for each. You basically rank them and say, okay, this is the ones that you want to call. And actually, now one thing that I also want to mention, right? So first of all, there's extra features that they use. For example, they're looking at CBS data, right? So statistics of their this company itself, where is it located, but also Chamber of Commerce data, what kind of company is it, which sector is it in. And also another thing that we looked at is the time of the day that they were calling. So you can call in the morning, you can go in the afternoon, or you can call in the evening. Is there specific businesses which you can call better in the morning or in the afternoon or the evening? What's the actual optimum there? So what they want to know now is, does this model work? If you put it in production, does it actually work? How well does it work? And most importantly, what is the business value that you get out of it? The hypothesis that we already can define here is, right, so the predicted top 30% of highly ranked sales leads, according to the model, have a higher chance of buying the internet product than the previous approach. Previous approach being the baseline, basically how they use it, the business as usual. Why 30%? That's basically their capacity, right? So you can only call so many people in this time that you have. So we're looking at 30% here. So actually, I also wanted to mention about the sales funnel that I've put here. This is valuable to understand. This is, you basically have a group of leads that you're looking at, and then you call, I don't know, an X percentage of that, and of those that are called, you reach so many of them, right? So you actually get to call them on the line, and then once you have a conversation with them, there's so much percentage you get a sale out. So that's, I guess, relevant also later on when we're analyzing it. Okay, so then use case number 2 is where we are looking at the effect of door-to-door action. So again, this is actually another telco, and the context is the following. They are rolling out fiber connections, and when you're rolling out fiber connections, you have to, dig up to put those lines in there. You have to go into the houses of people, of households, to make sure that you get that fiber connection in there. So you need to gather their permissions. This is actually legally it's necessary, so you have to get those permissions. So what they do, they send, before the rollout, they send a letter, ask them for permission, which they can do for your online tool. For example, a QR code, for example, and then you can say, okay, I give permission or not. But on top of that, right, so on top of this, the direct mail that you're doing, they also use door-to-door actions. Basically, it's an extra service that they provide because they also want to show how customer-oriented they are, like they have a brand to protect. And also a big part of it is to increase their permission rate. So they also ask for permission. But now this door-to-door obviously is quite expensive. So they would like to know, does this action that they use, does it actually have an effect on this permission rate? And if it does, how much is it? And maybe later on we can look at, okay, so is it so valuable? Like, how much does it cost, and does it deliver to what you're trying to achieve? Now, there's a bonus point because they're also curious. What are the type of households? What are the type of areas, basically, where you go to do this door-to-door action, where it has the most effect? Where do you have to apply this approach? In which area do you have to apply it in? which area is actually useless to do it. So hypothesis again is door-to-door actions increase the rate of permission compared to not having these door-to-door actions, obviously. Okay, so let's go back to why we're actually doing these experiments. Right, so we create experiments to test specific assumptions that we have. Our hypothesis. So hypothesis that's, by the way, is also good to check with the business, with your stakeholders. What are the hypotheses that you're checking at? Make sure that you have this aligned, but you want to test this hypothesis. And then, we actually want to find the actual effect of a specific action, be it a model that you're building or a channel that you're using, as I mentioned before. But actually, this actual effect of that and nothing else. So it's the pure effect. It's the causal effect. Name it what you want, but that is what you're trying to achieve. So you might say, okay, well, I've had applied, for example, I've done all these door-to-door actions in the past, so I can see, right? I can see what the effect has been. And right, so you can use historical data. So actually, I'm going to now look at those two use cases. So actually, the first one is looking at the effect of machine learning models, and the second one, the causal effect. So when we're looking at just causal effects, the door-to-door action, so there are ways to find causal effects using historical data. For example, by using a thing called instrumental variable regression. This is all very econometrical, but it's better if you can't, if you don't have to. If you can design an experiment, this is most of the time is the best way to compare the effect of an action with whatever the business as usual. So other names you can call it is a randomized control trial, right? Or making the test control groups. What you want is to randomize your control group, and then have a kind of treatment group, and to see randomize the where you put the people in, like how do you group them, and then taking actions on it so that you can actually see the effect, what the difference is between those two. So we can go show in a bit. When you are testing the effect of a machine learning model, so actually, when you have created a model, you could hold out a period of your data, right? So let's say, right, so you have your model, you have your training sets, and you have your test sets. For all the data scientists out there, you hold out this test set, but you might also hold out another set, which is basically where you say, I don't, up to this point, I'm going to build my model and test my model. And from there, I act as if I have not seen it before. And I'm going to score this model. I'm going to build predictions on that and see how well it does. And actually, this backtesting, if you do this well, is actually good enough to find your result, to find your uplift of your model. But I think there are still two reasons why you want to set up an experiment, anyway. And the first one would be, right, I think the field test itself, it is actually the true test where you can convince the business, because it's a test which will be most true to the new situation that you'll be in, right? So you're rolling it out later on, and you want to that's what you kind of like want to reproduce. And the second reason, I think, or more like after you're rolling out your model in production, it's always good practice to keep experiment going on, so you can check how well it is doing according to the baseline, and make sure that maybe there's some kind of model drift. You'll see differences going on. So I'm just going to check in the room if everything is clear up to this point. But I see some nodding, so I'm thinking I'm doing well. Okay, so approach, right? Jasper already mentioned the approach that they use Xomnia, and it is very close, of course, also to how you would do an experiment. And this is also how this outline I'm going to follow in the presentation. So design your experiment, conduct an experiment, and then analyzing your outcomes. So let's start with the first use case, and let's design the experiment. So the first thing, actually, it was also pointed out in Xomnia's blog post, and I'm trying to follow it here, is you set the baseline. So let's look at this machine learning model, and let's look how they're using it currently, or how they are calling right now. So currently what they do is they generate call lists, right? So they go to they look at the data from Chamber of Commerce. They have like this whole list, and they exclude leads that are already called in the past 3 months. They look at the do not call list, right? Bel me niet register. And other exclusion lists, and you take them out, and then you have your list for the week or for the month, and that's sent to the call center in a specific format, and then they're calling it basically. Now, if you think about it, it's basically just a random list of leads that they're sending out. So our baseline is random. And that's also what we'll be using it. So it'll just be a random list that we'll create as the baseline. Again, I'll just also point out the hypothesis, which is good to double check. So again, the model predicted top 30% of highly ranked sales leads have a higher chance of buying the product than the previous approach. I'm not going to go into too much detail of the statistical approach. Of course, the null hypothesis here would be that there is no effect, and then this would be kind of like the alternative hypothesis. The type of experiment that we're using is like an A/B test. So it could be, again, a bit more technical, the hypergeometric test or a binomial test that you're using. Right, and then you have the control group, which is then the baseline, the random set of leads. First, what you do is you take, you create your control group. You have your full data set of leads, right, that you've built, and then you just randomly pick how many you need, and then you do it again. But then you say, okay, this is then my test group. So this is like this is my top 30% according to my model, and then you randomly pick from that. Why do it in that order? Because if you do it the other way around, you might get more. The top 30% you already get from your test group is already removed from your control group, and then it doesn't really work. If you get what I mean. So I'm not mentioning too much here about the number of observations that you need, the number of leads that you need to take. What you need to look for is a power test. So usually you want to have some specific power of your statistical test. So you need to have, for example, let's say 800. For each group, you want to have 800 leads that you take, so that you have statistical significant power and statistical significance that you can get out of it, so you can actually say something useful about it. If you only take 10 and you say, well, it's statistically significant, well, that doesn't really say much. You want to have a good power of your test.
It was a big number as well.
Yeah, I think it was
several thousands or something.
I think we got 1,500 in each group, so we have like 3,000 those. Where do you have to take, when you do this power test, you have to look into what you expect. If your conversion currently is 5%, so you call 100 people and 5 of them get a sale, then your power, the number of observation will need to be larger to actually find an effect. All right. Then we go into the second use case, where we're looking at the finding the effect of a door-to-door action. It's very simple, right? So the client, for the baseline, the client can decide on having a team in an area, just go door to door, getting permission in the specific area, or they don't. In this case, households can still go online to give their permission after the request from the direct mail. So the baseline is not doing those extra actions, right? So the baseline is just business as usual, but just sending out the mail and then asking them to get the permission. And then the hypothesis again, we expect that the door-to-door actions increase the rate of permissions. No hypothesis will be there's no effect. The type of experiment is an A/B test. The control group is then the baseline, right? So a random set of households that you pick, and then there's a test group that is basically a random set that is not in the control group. Right, and then you can basically say, I want to. You look at your test group, you say, this is the ones where that get the treatment, this is the one where you actually go door to door, and the other ones where you don't. You have to think about it a bit because, okay, so you have an area and people go door to door, and maybe they have their list and they'll usually maybe they'll go one door to the other. Maybe they'll find out a little bit like, okay, I'm going to this door, but now the next list says they have to go 5 doors further. There's a bit of that. I thought about it, but it didn't really. Usually that could be because already permissions were given. So they were like, all right, I can skip a couple. That's okay. So I think it seems legit. It seems okay. Another thing that I didn't note in this slide, but I'll show in a bit, is like they want to know, right? They have the different groups of different types of households. So we're looking also at the older people, 65 plus, and the younger people, which is basically 65 minus, I guess. And then they want to know if there's a difference between those. Why? Because I guess older people, they don't really go online so quickly. They might need some contact or anything like that. So there's I'm simplifying a bit, but those are like also extra groups that you can look at. Challenge that actually was here is there's only so many people in the area, and there's only so many people who are 65 plus. So you have to really look carefully on how you're going to distribute that. So you still have enough power, but you can also and you can say something about it. But you also and then you also have you can say basically that. That's about this part, designing it for these 2 use cases. Just checking. Any questions? All clear?
One question here. How do you know the age of these people of this test group?
Good question. So actually,
Repeat the question.
Yeah, sure. So the question is, how do you know the age of these people? And I didn't. But what you do know is, again, I'm simplifying in this example, but what you do know is the CBS data, right? So we can look at the percentage of people that are older than that. And actually, when you look at this data there, you can actually see that there is indeed differences between permissions that they give or not.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
So I assume this is after the proof of concept, or is this part of the proof of concept?
So this specific use case is not related to a machine learning or an AI solution. So this is this just is an experiment that we're doing. The other one, well, when you think about proof of concept, is you can prove, right? You can build a model and then you prove that you can build it. But then we want to look into the proof of value. So is it actually, what kind of value is that? Does that answer your question? Or?
Yeah, because this is quite a thorough experiment. I can imagine it takes a lot of time to actually have the control group and the test group and to go door to door. So you first need to have like proper idea that it will work, or that it actually will. In like in the field of analytics translation, it's like important to know that you're not going to waste any money on an experiment that might turn out to result in.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, they were already doing this. So they were all going door to door.
Yeah.
And they would just, but the way they're doing it is just like, all right, let's just go to this area because I think that works better, or we have some budget left and let's go there. So in this sense, this is a different kind of setup. They were already doing it. They just wanted to know, should they have done it or not? How should they do it in the future?
Well, the first case, I think it was part of the POC, right? It was
Yeah.
productionized afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. So, and this one is indeed, this is part of the POC, building a model. We think the model is legit. I think it's good. And then I guess in that sense, POC, or how you would define it, we proved that you can build it, but now what's the value? So yeah, it is part of the POC indeed. Any other questions? Do I see questions there?
Take into account the fact that neighbors, if you came to a neighbor and door to door and to another one you didn't, but if you convince the one who you came to, they can convince the neighbor.
Yeah, I thought about that, and I'll repeat the question, by the way. So you have you're going door to door. What the extra effect that you have is that maybe, let's say I'm in his house and then somebody comes in and says, hey, did you I want to put some give some permission? Then maybe you talk with your neighbors about it, and they're like, oh yeah, right, I got this letter, I need to do permission. So there is that effect. I did not take that into account, but it is something you have to indeed consider when analyzing it. And there's some of these things you just can't help, right? Exactly. It's still, we want to know kind of like if there is some kind of effect and how much it is. So any other questions? Or okay, then let's continue. So conducting experiment is, well, very straightforward. You just send out the list and let's go. But I do wanted to give some considerations here. So the first one noted down is you want to collaborate extensively with your stakeholders. For example, with your call center or with the communication manager. When you're sending out the list, you want to send it in the same format, for example, and also you want to actually do as if nothing else. Just do what you usually do, but this is a different list. Just act as if it's business as usual. And actually, it is the best way to do it like that. It's kind of like, when you have an experiment, you want to do it blinded as much as possible. You might know some psychology experiments where they do this, like they have all kinds of blinds in that, like even sometimes the researcher doesn't even know what's happening, or the experimenter. So you want to make it as plain as possible. But also you still need to kind of like make sure that you talk with them, make sure that everything is that it looks like it's business as usual for them. Second point, I think this is just a little pitfall that we fell into. So when you create your data set and you deliver that for your experiment, make sure you save that tag data set as well, right? So which one is test and which one is control. It's not that I made a mistake, it's just that I think there was a OneDrive crash or something like that, and I had to get it back and all that. So very important point. And I think the third point is about contamination, and that's a very important point, I think. There should not be any other experiment running at the same time. And there should not also be some other wild thing happening that you did not anticipate. So just really make sure that you take the lead on this. Like say, okay, is there really nothing else happening? Why? Because you want to know the actual pure effect and not some effect combined with some other kind of experiments. And
many experiments and then reject.
Sorry?
Alternatively, you can run very, very long experiments and then it should have your chance.
Yeah, or that exactly, and then you're just checking what the different experiments are. No, actually, of course, all these things happen. They just always happen. Okay, so this one also happened to me, of course. There was contamination, which means that there was another part where they were getting permissions. There was the construction worker. They were also getting permissions. And they were doing at that time, right after the week when their experiment was going, the second week, and then you have to find it in the data quality. Well, obviously, let's not go into that. Yeah, it sucks. And also they were like, okay, we can't go now because it's snowing. We can't go on the street when it's snowing. Another thing that you can't really, anticipate. Make sure that you have it all as tight as possible. And the last point that I want to make is wait it out. Wait until the experiment is complete. And this has to do with you have your power. For example, you know that we need to reach 1,000 leads or 1,000 customers. Then you just have to wait until you reach that point. And you can't go back to the stakeholders and say, yeah, already we have some preliminary results. No, just wait. Because if you do, then they'll also have some like, oh, see, it's going well. No, just wait until you got to that point, and then you can go back and report on that. And that might be that it takes some time before you get there. Yeah, I guess you just have to be patient. All right, so all dummy data, by the way. I just made some guesstimates of how it could be. So the use case number 1, right? So we have our machine learning model. We're testing it out in the field. And to the right, you'll see the sales funnel that we created. So let's say you have your 1,500 leads. Now it works. What happens is that maybe our power would be 1,000 would be enough, but I think that's another consideration. Maybe you need a bit more people because sometimes they don't. In this case, they didn't really call everyone right away. So let's say we have 1,500 leads. 1,000 of them are called. 500 of them are reached, and then 50 of them actually get a sale. So this is the baseline, right? So the baseline is that you have 50% of your leads that you reach, and then 50 of those. So it's 10% of those that you get a sale. That's like a 5% conversion on your calls. Because after analyzing results, actually what we find out is that this reachability is actually a much easier measure and to analyze. And obviously, it's also linearly related with sales, right? So if you reach more people, you get more sales. Doesn't always work, but this is pretty much how that came out to be. So we take this reachability as the main measure, which we report back, and also you'll see that this is easier to be statistically significant. Going back, so now we have our test. So right, we have a baseline of 50% reachability. Then we look at our test set and we see trickling down, we have a 62% reachability. So that's actually pretty good, right? So you have your result. Now you can say, see, our machine learning model works. But now actually, this is the point when you want to go back to your business and create your business case, which Jasper also mentioned before. I'm going to make this very simple because you can go very deep with your business case. You can talk about the costs and the revenue, and you can go in the cost of your project. You can go very deep with this. Let's just look at the cost per order, which is a measure that we're usually using over there. Cost per order is the CPO, I didn't write it out, but it's the cost per order, is basically how much does one extra order cost you. So let's say the call center calls 1,000 leads. This costs you 5,000 euros. That means your cost per order is 5,000 euros divided by the 50, right, in our baseline of sales, which means that you have 100 euro costs per your sale per order. In a test, so using the model, we have 5,000. So we have again 5,000 euro divided by 62 is around 80 euros cost per order, which means that our model gives the client around 20 euros of cost savings per extra order. Now that's quite a nice number that you can go back to and say, use this, and this is the amount of savings you should do for each extra order that you create. Clear, I think?
So did you mention that this is where you would make the business case? I think you said that, right?
Yeah, so
I would assume you make the business case beforehand.
Yeah, no.
So, well, if we can improve by this much, okay, yeah.
You're right. You're right.
This
This is basically validating a business case. So indeed, right. So in the project, we looked at what is the business case. So you go into the business, and then we go really deep into, okay, what's your customer lifetime value?
Yeah.
What is your all the other costs that you have, and then you can then fill in the numbers, and boom, you have your case. Which basically could be in a very simple Excel sheet, which you just fill in your numbers, or another complicated Python script. I don't know, but you know what I mean.
I think we built a Shiny app.
We built it was a Power BI dashboard, so I remember.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, then let's go over the second use case. I don't know if it's clear enough. Yeah, I think so. Again, dummy data, and made it a bit, simplified it a bit. But what you see is, you see the first two bars is like basically your overall effect that you find. The first bar is your control group, and the second bar is your test group. So the first bar is your baseline. The second bar is basically the action of going door to door. And overall, what you see is a 10% increase, right? So let's say this is statistically significant. So you see that there is an effect on using the door-to-door channel to get more permissions, and the effect is a 10% increase. Now, if we look at the second two bars, is you see a 65%, so 65 plus a group that indeed it has more effect. So 74% over there relates to 60, so there's 14% increase. I simplified a bit, makes it easier to explain, but let's say the younger people, there you see a 4% increase, which is not significant, right? Or maybe it is, but I didn't show, but let's say it's not significant. So then you could say that using this model works best on, so using this door-to-door channel is actually works best on 65 plus people. So the business case is, what if we send a team to visit 800 households in the area? This costs you, let's say, around 4,000 euros. Then the extra permission would cost you 4,000 divided by 80. So that's 10%, right? Extra revenue of 800 households is 60 euros. And the question is this worth it? Because this is not, in this case, it's not really a business where they were looking at, they were looking at costs so much. They just have a specific budget. So say, okay, do we allocate budget there to get some permission or not? But that's something that you can go back to the business to. But I think the main key takeaway of this was that when communicating this to the communication teams, they were like, nice, this is good, because now we know where to use our door-to-door channel. we have to go to the older crowd, or like an area where there's older people, to get a better effect, and not waste our effort on the kind of younger crowds. So that's basically the end of my presentation. So I'm just going to check if there's some more questions about these couple of slides.
Well, stupid typical mathematics question, but why is 4,000 divided by 60 or 50?
Maybe I made a mistake. Thanks.
And how's the team gonna knock on doors again? Sorry for the age question again, but like knock on door, open door. Hey, young person. No, I'm gonna sell to you. I'm gonna go to
This is a bit further in. No, very, very good question. So the question, I think I need to repeat the questions again, but how do you know whether there's actually an old person or a young person living there? It's basically generally like, okay, well, this is an area where you see that the demographics is older people. So let's do our door-to-door action there. This is demographics with more juppen, maybe families. Don't waste your efforts there. Just place it on the other side. Yeah.
Did you take the type of housing into account, like rental or buying?
Yes, actually. Exactly. So part of this project was actually looking at much at the analysis of like how permissions were doing, and you see a thing where they looked at flats, like higher, taller buildings, and kind of like maybe houses, so lower buildings, so laagbouw and hoogbouw, and there's a stark difference between the two, but it makes sense because well, if you go into a flat, you have to climb all the way up, and if the one downstairs doesn't give permission, then it's basically useless to go to the other flat. So yeah, there's lots of that as well. In this example, again, I simplified. I looked at that specific variable as well to see where to go to, and some kind of other variables to look at. But you can only do so much with an experiment because you have so much people that they can go to.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave. All right.
So do.
Yeah, you can sit down. Probably shout at each other. So, time for our final final formal part of the evening. The idea is that we're going to be exchanging some thoughts, and to facilitate this, we brought out the good old Mentimeter. So if you can scan the QR code, or alternatively go to Mentimeter or menti.com and fill in this code, we can start asking you a couple questions. I'm going to be looking at if I can actually zoom in or log into the Menti thing. Oh, that's of course not really handy the way I do it right now. Everybody can still see it? Yes. By the way, this is the time to grab an extra beer if you want to. Ja, nog bier. Lekker. Thank you.
Oh, the administrator and I serve
All right. I see some nice results coming in. And of course, for those that didn't notice the sort of inception thing here, this is, of course, a bit of an experiment because I don't know about you guys, but I had a sort of a preconception about what the result would be. And I think I just rejected my hypothesis because I was kind of thinking that a lot more people would actually never have done any kind of experiment. From what I've been hearing at clients is that usually a business case is just a business case, and then we just go on with building a data model or a data science model. So I'm actually kind of curious about two groups here, and probably the people online have voted as well. But first of all, I'm curious about the middle bar, so the kind of bar. So any people here that filled in that one? We want to hear some stories. All right, so we have one here. Can we toss the cube mic over there? So if you can talk into the cube thing.
I can talk very, very loud. If
Yeah,
you
for the
see
people online.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Well, it's very easy. I work for the government, so we don't have such a business context formally. Yeah, we deal with policies. Of course, also money involved, but mainly policies.
And do you make hypotheses and design an experiment, or how do you go about?
Yeah, also kind of design an experiment, but yeah, like I said, it's not that flat on money. Yeah, we expect a certain outcome, and then we hope to validate or not, or the possibility.
Right. So influencing certain policies is notoriously hard to prove, right?
Yeah.
For example, within the crime domain, it's quite hard to prove that you actually prevented crime.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, I work in COVID data, so it was really hard to prove. Sort of.
I can imagine. So, but for the rest, did you follow this experiment design?
Not really following like a protocol form. No, actually, no. Yeah. But yeah, so to give an example, last year I was checking the vaccination data of certain provinces in the Netherlands based on their religion, of course, and also their political preference.
Right.
And then the effects of COVID infections. And then you have a certain expectation. Yeah, that's
either proven or disproven.
Exactly.
Right. Cool. Interesting. Thank you. Saw another hand going up. Yeah, if you can toss the cube just over there. Yeah, it's really dynamic interaction.
Oh, this is wonderful. Well, mine was in the Stone Age. I should get a bit further from this thing, I believe.
Are we okay?
I was hearing some echoes.
Just go on. We're good.
Well, I was working at the Phone House, a vendor of cell phones in the early 2000s, and we were doing, it was kind of informal. We did look at data to find out where you would set up shop, not just of, hey, real estate is expensive here, this must be a great place to have a shop. But we did we looked at some information. As I said, it's not really data science, but we were looking at information on population size, income, demographics, and and it was nothing more than Excel, but it did some of this. And I would never in my life call myself a data scientist over this. but it had a lot of the hallmarks, and it was crap because I was surrounded by people who, well, whose idea of mathematics was buying a pocket calculator. Business majors in.
But were you successful?
Well, they went bankrupt.
I'll take that as a no.
Were we successful? We opened a bunch of stores in really weird places where they made a lot of money.
Cool.
And they opened a lot of stores in places that sounded really convincing, where they lost a lot of money. If you look in Amsterdam, they opened a shop in Hoofddorpplein, which is, anybody was thinking, why the F would you open a phone store there? It was extremely profitable. They opened one in the Kalverstraat, and well, it was even if there hadn't been fraud, it would have been a big loss. But they also had some people who just gave away the phones and pretended that they were sold and put the money in their own pocket.
Contamination.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
So it was a learning experience for me,
cool.
And I thought, well, this is the real world. It's not for me. So nice. I went back to programming.
Thank you for that.
Anybody else? Please.
And I'm also quite curious about the big red bar on the right. So we have a bunch of people that had an enthusiastic, yes, I've proven the value of AI. So any people in the room that have done so and dare to speak up? Yeah, we have one at the front. Very good.
I used to work for United Wardrobe, secondhand fashion marketplace.
Cool.
Building recommender systems. So it's the very cut and dry. You have online transactions. Everything's already digitized. Make an A/B test and prove that you have uplift.
Yeah. Would you say that the online environment is a sort of a really easy place to prove this value because of the ease with which you can perform an A/B test?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of the data is already in a database. It's the main part of the company itself. It's not a side thing.
Yeah.
So there's already a lot of people worrying about data quality, worrying about are the choices that we make the right ones. It's very easy to convince someone to do data science experiments, and it's also very easy to run them because everything's already there.
Yeah. Could you bring us along in how you quantified this business impact? Or I'm not sure if you did it, but how was this done?
Simple A/B test. So we have the proof of concept was, all right, we have some kind of ranking of which products we should show people.
Mm-hmm.
We have how they used to do it, so based by popularity ranking. And we did a proof of concept of this new recommendation system thing. We did the first proof of concept purely by dog fooding. So we figured out what the user IDs were of people that worked there, fed it to them, showcased this does feel right. After that, we did a simple A/B test split. So in the backend code, we said, all right, half the people run through this recommender system, half the people run through something else. Pump it all into a database, say, all right, this is the cutoff point. Very, very importantly, talk to the business and say, you cannot look at the results beforehand, because if you do, when it says it's significant, there is this much % chance that it's just bullshit.
Yeah.
It's.
So how was it actually translated into euros or dollars or whatever? The uplift that you saw?
It was uplift. So the cumulative amount of uplift that I've done through, I think, 50 odd experiments was roughly 20% revenue, cool. Which is it's a nice thing to be able to say.
Yeah. So in that sense, you when made it all the way through to analyzing results, communicating it, and making people happy.
Exactly.
Pretty good. Thanks for that. We have another question. Where's my mouse? Can I just go on to the next one? I guess not. Then, of course, we have this question that I can present. So we've been talking about conducting experience with data science or data teams. But as you probably know, there are a lot of types of data professionals out there. So my question to you right now is, who should be actually leading this initiative to prove a predictive model's value or to lead this experiment? Really curious. And I have a hunch people on the front will be saying. Chief Data Officer. Chief Decorator of the office. I recognize a pattern. Dan is happy. Data scientist taking the lead. Very good. So who totally disagrees with what we're seeing here? Who thinks this is not the way it should be? Yes, please. Can we throw the cube over there? Was an exciting moment. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andrei. So I think the IT manager is exactly the person who has to have an eye and like to lead this thing, because it's the bridge between the software engineers and all the other people which are going around in the building. From the perspective of software engineer, each of these persons, they are somehow doing something as a daily kind of their job. They're not concerned about what is happening around. They just have some kind of task. They're checking on it. Okay, he did the task. Probably he could do it better or slower. It doesn't matter. He watches a YouTube video, checks on this stuff. Then okay, task is done. The IT manager, if it's a good IT manager who also understands code and can kind of clearly understand what the engineer is doing there, he has an understanding of the potential of things, what is happening around in the engineering department, and with an understanding of the capacity of the engineering department, he can communicate to all our departments, because basically all of them, they can group in one room, and then there is another room with the software engineer, and only this manager knows what is happening, because other people have no clue.
Yeah.
So this is the only person who is clearly seeing what's happening around.
I think
if the IT manager also was a software developer before. If he wasn't, because there are a lot of cases I've worked, like there is an IT manager who was not a programmer. So he was so worthless that companies went down. Like.
So you're describing an ideal type here. Yeah, I think you've been fortunate enough to.
It doesn't have to be a good kind of software engineer with a lot of experience. A few years, like it's enough. But if you're an IT manager, you have to know what happens, because you have like 10 people in the team, everybody is submitting some stuff, and then you have to check on it. If you don't understand what is submitted there, then you don't realize that that work could be done like in 10 times less time. So people are wasting time. So that's another question. But according to this subject, that's exactly the person who knows what is happening. So
yeah, and I guess it depends on the way data is organized
there
within
is a
a
lot
company
of
as
things,
well, right?
yeah, because data anyway, you take this an object with some attributes.
Yeah.
And
I think
cannot start it like that, but there's the person who exactly has to understand what is happening in the environment and why the test is needed in the first place. There's the person who has to know it, and according to this, like, because otherwise, I don't know. That's just my point of view.
I think you've been fortunate enough to know IT managers that also have an interest in business impact. Unfortunately, some of the IT managers I've known solely focus on maintaining IT solutions. And you can debate whether or not data science models are actually IT solutions, but that's for another meetup.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for someone that that actually wants to react upon this point. So someone that scored it.
My main idea was just is that that's the person who should decide, and is it happening or not? Like, that's the only person who understands if it has like a reason to happen.
Yeah.
And then
someone from the crowd, a reaction, someone that voted for a PO or a data scientist or a business analyst.
I guess it's important to have context knowledge to lead such projects. Neither one is relevant for leading it. For example, if it is about marketing people should lead it. If it is about R&D people should lead it. Let's say that if you build a new product or optimize the existing product, and you know the details of the product. If you are still producer and one ingredient has been skyrocketed as price-wise, and you want to optimize and build similar quality new product, you cannot drop this kind of project towards IT people, data science, or business owner. So such projects should be in the occupation of R&D people. Of course, they can drop down some roles to product owner, data scientist, and IT people. But at the end, the predictive model does not cover the context. Context should be context knowledge people.
Yeah. I think you just proved the point that I wanted to make here as well, because there's no right answer here. Yeah. So it's always one of the favorite answers. It depends, right? It depends on the context. It depends on the way data and analytics is organized within a company. Yeah, I was just curious about your thoughts. I think time-wise, we're going to be moving on as well. So, and of course, this is also the end of my free Mentimeter subscription. So that's always a sad thing to see. Let me just put on presenter view. I do have one. Yes. So I do have one question for you guys. So, are there any situations in which it's actually just impossible, plain impossible, to prove a machine learning model's value? Or should it always be possible to build something and then be able to say, hey, we created this business impact? I don't want to dwell on this too long. It's just a little needle prick.
Obviously, small data sets are always a problem. Shouldn't be too difficult. Or things that make data science impossible. I think that those
probably a lot of places where it's almost impossible to create a data set that isn't contaminated. One of the first things that my friends learned when they were starting business was that every test that has ever been done with people is immediately contaminated, because the mere fact that workers were getting attention from management was enough to make them work harder. So, yeah, halo effect, those things. So if you're working with people, it's going to be very difficult. If you're working with small groups, it's going to be very difficult. If you have very heterogeneous populations, do a data science project in the Belmer. Try to talk to people there.
So would you agree that in a sense, it's also a data scientist's job to make people enthusiastic about the stuff that they're building, which in a way can be a success factor as well?
Absolutely, but just as much it should be their task to say, don't do this, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
Because you want to be credible when you say, but you should do that. If you're simply a cheerleader, you're going to lose your, well, not just your respectability, but also your credibility.
Let's just say we define that as a separate role, the evangelist, right?
Yeah.
Any other? Yes. Impossible to prove an AI model's value.
Well, not so much an AI model, but more a hypothesis. Perhaps when you have a situation where putting people in the control group would be unfair or unethical or not healthy. For example, going to college increases your success in life, right? You don't want to say to someone, okay, you are indeed admitted to our college, but we won't let you because we want to prove that going to college is in fact going to improve your life.
Quite harsh.
Yeah, something like that.
Indeed. Do these situations happen business-wise though? Could you think of an unethical situation? I don't know, perhaps in the medical...
Vaccinations, yeah, perhaps.
Cost of healthcare in America.
We probably can debate about this all night, but I want to leave this as a bit of food for thought before you guys are going home. Speaking about going home, I wanted to give something to you as an audience to take away. My original plan was to click through all of these. I won't bother you guys by doing that. I just saved you guys an hour of Googling and put it all together here. So we're going to be sending you these slides, and yeah, you can check these resources afterwards. Funny thing is, there are a number of free resources out there that you can use to start designing and conducting your experiments. Of course, there's this great article written by an analytics translator at Xomnia. I'm not sure if you guys have read it all, but it actually goes in a little bit more depth about all the stages that we just described this evening. But there's also a number of other articles out there. For example, there's a free book about the design and analysis of experiments in R, which is quite nice. It's a really hefty read, but yeah, you probably would need this and sort of check it out once or twice if you're going to be designing something like this. The same goes with, of course, you guys all know Medium, which is a nice way of sharing knowledge. There's a really bunch of valuable stuff on there, including code snippets on how to run experiments with Python. I included a bunch of those here. And finally, there's also something about process improvement. I actually want to show you guys this one. This is crazy. Just look at this incredibly detailed list of everything about how to run an experiment and then start doing stuff with process analysis. It's insane. Yeah, it's a little nugget of gold that I wanted to put in here for you as well. Then there are also a bunch of courses, of course. which is always a bit of a bigger step to take. But you have a bunch of data camp courses, which you probably are all familiar with. They're quite digestible, I would say. And there's also a bunch of stuff online, which is basically the materials within this course, but then written out in a blog, including some code snippets again. And there's a free Coursera course about experimentation for improvement, which is done by a professor from an American university. So which libs are there out there? Which libraries? So one which is often used is, of course, stats models, which you can use to do your statistical tests. But there are also some packages like Dopey, which is a quite nice name, I think, which of course stands for Design of Experiments in Python, and then you can reverse them. You have PyDo, which doesn't sound as nice, but those are two packages that you can use. Then, I'm not sure, did you use any specific packages when conducting these experiments, or just the R, regular R libraries? Regular R libraries, there you go. Cool. So we're going to be sending these to you, just a little gift for this evening. I have a final question to Tim, perhaps as a recap as well. So if everybody in the crowd wants to just enthusiastically start their day tomorrow with saying, I want to start a new proof of value initiative. So which are the pitfalls that they should be really wary of, and how can you actually avoid them? Yeah, if you can toss the mic over there. Yeah. Nice.
All right, so let's dig back into my presentation. I think the first one would be the contamination, right? So what we talked about, just make sure that you're not running some other experiment or there's some other stuff happening while you're doing the experiment. Really take care of that. What else did I put there? Yeah, right, exactly. And I think also pointed out by this gentleman here is like, have to wait until the experiment is complete, really for the statistical significance, really, making sure that you get at the end. I think those two, and yeah, like I think also what is also basically the whole approach, make sure that you think about your experiment as much as possible. Make sure that you have everything taken care of before you start. On the other hand, don't wait too long with it. Maybe you should just actually start experimenting, right? I think that's especially key takeaways for me.
So be patient, but not too patient.
There you go.
Cool. Thank you. That's it. I think the crowd was quite interactive already, but if you have any more questions and you'd like to see them answered, we can do so over drinks. So thank you.